So, Bonnie, why is it important in your view for attorneys to start thinking beyond just legal services and start thinking themselves as a business that can actually grow?
It's so important for estate planning attorneys to really think beyond simply the legal services that they provide and really consider themselves business owners. They are running a business, they're building a business, running it, creating it. And if they think of themselves only as legal service providers, what's going to happen are the important business pieces are going to fall through the cracks, whether it's the financials or the right choices when it comes to your software stack that you use in your firm to keep things running, or hiring the right people and knowing when to let go people who aren't a good fit with your culture or for the future of your firm. All of those things I just mentioned are all about being a business owner. It doesn't matter what you provide. Every business owner has to think through financials and hiring and firing and software and systems. And so if all you're focusing on is simply legal services, which is all they teach us in law school. Like there's literally no course even on just, marketing 101 or business building 101. Nothing like that exists. And so out of law school, we don't even realize we need to do these things. But as soon as you hang your shingle or you partner and maybe you have a small firm, you've got all these other considerations from the business side. And you, of course, don't want to run afoul of any compliance required as a business owner with your Secretary of State or the IRS or anything like that. So you cannot just think about legal services, although of course that's the backbone of what you do. You cannot run a successful business where you have profit to take home. You're not stressed. You actually have time to spare for your family. You're not working late nights or weekends unless you're going beyond simply what do I provide to how do I provide it overall holistically as a business.
And I suppose that's really important then for especially for solopreneurs. There's the solopreneurs, they have to think past just providing the service, just being a commodity. And they start thinking about them being, like you just said, having more time, having more income, for example, more time with the family. So what common growth traps do you see solo attorneys have and small firms? What kind of traps do they fall into that gets them stuck at this particular revenue level or time spent in the office area?
There are a couple of common growth traps that estate planning attorneys, solo attorneys tend to fall into, and it keeps them stuck at a certain income level. And you don't want to be stuck. I mean, if you're stuck, it's kind of like you're either growing or you're dying. Somebody said that. I'm not going to take credit for that quote. So you don't want to get stuck. A common growth trap, for example, is doing a really big marketing push that, let's say, is successful, which is amazing, but then basically totally forgetting to market because now you're buried by fulfilling with these new clients that marketing push brought in the door. And so that's a growth trap, meaning that if you aren't keeping your marketing system working for you, even when you need to devote a good deal or all of your time to fulfilling on the client's estate plans that they have hired and paid you for, then now you're going to look up in a month or two and you're going to realize, like, I have no prospective client appointments on the calendar. I have no incoming new revenue that you can see on the horizon for the next 1 to 2 months because you went all in on marketing. And then you said, okay, I'm going to set that aside. Now I'm going to go all in on service. And then when you look up, it's almost kind of like, if you're just treading water and you can't even hardly look up and out and kind of see what you need to do because you're just focused on staying right there and maintaining that level. What's going to happen is you will go through feast or famine. It's the roller coaster cycle that we hear about as business owners. And it's called feast or famine for a reason. I mean, I think it has a negative connotation for a reason because nobody wants that level of uncertainty. When is it feast? When is it famine? How long is each cycle going to be? We don't want that level of uncertainty. And the only way you can be certain about, how things are working in your firm or systems across the board, marketing, fulfillment, and staying in touch with your clients over time. So that's a common growth trap, is focusing on only one piece of your system at a time. Another exceedingly common growth trap, I've been caught in this trap myself as well, is I might call it just fear, or maybe it's an unwillingness, but maybe fear, where you are not delegating out non-attorney work. You fear that maybe the person you spend time hiring and training is just going to quit the next day and you don't want to make that investment and then lose it. Or the fear that you're going to delegate something to them and they're going to do it wrong and you're going to have to clean up their mess. Or the fear that no one can do it as good as you. That's not really a fear. That's more of just kind of a little bit of an egotistical assumption, because even if they don't do it as good as you, if it's non-attorney work, you are losing money because your hourly rate, and I don't mean that you're charging hourly as estate planning, so to be clear, but the value of an hour of your time is so much higher when you're doing work that only you can do as a licensed attorney with experience. Only you can bring in revenue equivalent to the value of your hour. So if you're doing your bookkeeping, In QuickBooks, if you're scanning signed originals to give your clients PDFs and you're not willing to delegate that out, you have put a ceiling on your own growth. So those are the two most common growth traps that I've seen.
That's a really interesting thing. If you have to take both of those and separate them, the first one, the feast and famine, like you said, it generally has a negative connotations to it. It's the famine side of it, not filling that pipeline enough and then focusing on the wrong things. And it's you're either facilitating or you're marketing, and rather than doing both. But then, like you said, that can change. But then we need to grow. And as you say, now we have to put trust in other people, trust in the system to grow. So that takes away the need for well, it doesn't, it builds the need for consistency, and therefore it comes down to steady growing steadily. How does a legacy system help attorneys build predictable systems that support steady yet scalable growth?
So, legacy system helps estate planning attorneys build these predictable systems so that you can grow steadily, you can scale steadily, you can kind of predict it, you can project it, and you're meeting those projections because we focus on the complete 8-phase system. There are 8 phases, start to finish, in building an estate planning firm. And the reason I know this is I did it myself, and now I've taught hundreds of attorneys to do it as well. And I've isolated that there are 8 phases involved. So if you are not dialing in aspects of the system for each one of your phases, which does include marketing, it includes the prospective client meeting and everything surrounding that meeting to make it 100% likely in most cases that you are getting a new client that day, to fulfilling on their plan and drafting high quality plans promptly, and clients aren't waiting 6, 8, 10 months for you to call them back or send them a draft for them to review or anything like that. All 8 phases we have an exact system for. I was actually just doing a training a couple of days ago, a live training where I focused only on one phase. It was actually really fun because I just said, let's just focus for a day on just one phase and let's go as deep as we can. And I'm going to be doing that for all 7 phases because we had such a good time doing it for that one phase about converting prospects into clients. And so what we teach at Legacy System, we have video lessons, audio, templates, samples, guides, resources, you name it, to say, okay, if you're going to look at your intake system right now, or if you're going to look at your drafting system or your marketing system on the front end or your retention system to stay in touch with your clients over time, because we know they'll need updates, then you need to implement boom, 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 each of these things. So the beautiful thing about Legacy System, in my opinion, is that we don't leave any stone unturned about what it looks like for an estate planning attorney specifically to build out the 8 phases, the systems around the 8 phases, and have literally, I mean, imagine a 1,000-piece puzzle. If you only have, say, 900 pieces or let alone 100 pieces, you're not finishing that puzzle. It will never be finished. It will never be a good product you would put in front of anybody. And so you need every puzzle piece. And that's what we're here for, is to say there are a lot of them. It could be overwhelming to tackle them all at once, but we help you sequence it in the right order and get you fully stood up on all 8 phases.
So let's talk about some of the phases. One of the things that we've talked about before is the client experience. And we know a lot of attorneys will, irrespective of their niche, grow their business based upon referrals. You know, the more referrals they get, the more they go. So why, in your opinion, is client experience one of the most underrated factors in growing a referral-based estate planning practice?
So, in my opinion, the reason that client experience tends to be overlooked or it's quite underrated as part of how you grow an estate planning practice is that it's hard, unless you're intentional, it's hard sometimes to see, to literally imagine what it looks like from someone else's point of view. You don't accidentally discover a client experience just by walking along and focusing on something else. So you have to decide it's not just about you in the sense of, like we talked about, building your 8 phases. You need to do that. But what you also need to think through is you're building out anything, because I want to be clear, the system that we teach is not cookie cutter. It is systematized. And then you decide based on your preferences as a business owner, your community and their needs, where you might need to make small tweaks to make it work in your context. But the idea is that you set up these systems, but you're also everywhere along the way, we're helping you see, well, you do it this way on your end. What does it look like to the client? Like, for example, one of the places where clients tend to just not know what's going on and don't understand why it takes so long is when the attorney is drafting the plan. So in between that initial meeting and when they come in next to sign the plan, some attorneys go MIA and they're not at all thinking, well, what does the client think that I'm doing? And is the client even, are they wondering when I'm going to call them back? So you have to be very intentional to say, I'm going to take kind of an empathetic point of view. If I were that client, What would they think right now when I haven't communicated with them for 3 weeks since the time they wrote me a check for $5,000? Because what happens is people who make these kind of big ticket purchases, and in the moment they know they need to, and this, they understand the need and the value, but they're going to go home, and if they don't hear from you for 3 weeks, how would you feel if you wrote that check and didn't hear from your service provider for 3 weeks? So you have to decide, I'm not only going to build this system, but I'm going to be taking these pauses, these moments to say, what does that look like from the client side? So one of the things that we built out when I've built out tech stacks for estate planning attorneys as part of what I've done over the years is we built in automated checkpoints during that drafting phase where the systems we built for these attorneys, it would automatically check in with the clients. Here's where we are. Here's our plan. The draft of your plan is at this phase. It's in proofreading phase. Now it's in review phase, and we'll see you next week for your signing. And it's so simple. I think we're going to talk about automation as well as part of this, because automation is incredibly amazing in the sense of it's you showing up on your best day every time on time, no matter what's going on, else is going on in your life or your client's life. And so the idea is that these are automated checkpoints, but the amount of peace of mind it gives to your paying clients really is second to none. But you have to decide that it's important to you to consider their experience, not just yours.
That's such a valid point, Bonnie. And I can almost hear some really, really busy attorneys going, yes, Bonnie, I understand. And I know I should be doing it, but where am I going to get the time? I just don't have the time to do that. So let's talk about that. How can attorneys use automation? And that's going to be a big, scary word for some of them out there. But how can attorneys use automation and better workflows to free up their time, not just for strategic growth activities, but also for better client experiences?
So, estate planning attorneys have such an opportunity to use automation and better workflows to free up their time, whether it's for strategic growth activities or simply more time with your kiddos. Whatever you decide to do with that freed up time is up to you. But absolutely, freeing up time is so incredibly valuable. So, the way that I've done it, I did it in my own firm, and I've built this for hundreds and hundreds of attorneys, and part of it is I need to help them, even though they might subscribe to my program and they're like, oh, I need automation because they've heard they need it. They don't totally get the point of it until they really get into it. So I try to explain it this way. I try to explain it where there are things that you do. Well, you should do, I should say. If you've got a system, but let's say it's not automated at all, but at least it's a system where you say every client experiences all these things start to finish. Who's going to do that on time, every time, no matter what, across the board? It's not humanly